Welcoming. Good afternoon. My name is Captain Aaron Brosnahan, retired. Welcoming all of you to our Naval Order Continental Commandery chat. We've been doing this webinar now for a couple of months, and happy to have you all with us. Today we wanted to spend some time with Rear Admiral Chris Cole, who was most recently looking after the Navy Safe Harbor Foundation. So he's going to tell us a little bit about Navy Safe Harbor Foundation, as well as the Navy Wounded Warrior Program. This is really a great opportunity for us to learn more about how we take care of wounded warriors and how we can be involved and understand the great impact that's happening day in and day out on behalf of our sailors. Just as a reminder to everybody, the Naval Order, it's an organization that's been around for a long time. It was actually founded on the 4th of July in 1890, and it's a hereditary organization, but its main mission is to preserve, promote, and to celebrate and enjoy the nation's sea services. So what we'd like to do is commemorate our heroes and our important historical events. We really want to support the study of naval history through writing, through speaking, and through educational events. But we also want to preserve sea service artifacts and look for ways that we can get documents in archives and be able to put monuments up so that people can recognize the great things that have been happening. We're also about promoting camaraderie, and our companions and members get together in local meetings, but also at national level. So I certainly welcome any of you to join us for those types of events. But we also, we're a unique organization that's really looking to partner on behalf of the Navy, looking for ways that we can, really link our past with what we can do in the future. So really happy to have you with us, and we look forward to having a good conversation for this afternoon. So as mentioned before, we have Rear Admiral Chris Cole with us, U.S. Navy retired. He is a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He was most recently with the Naval Safe Harbor Foundation, as well as the Association of the U.S. Navy. He's had a very storied career in the Navy, which included duty as a pilot with the helicopter anti-submarine squadron HS-15 on board the USS Nimitz. He was also a personnel exchange program pilot with the Canadian Forces, serving as detachment commander on the HMCS Athabaskan. He was also the operations officer of HS-5 on board the Dwight Eisenhower, an executive officer and commanding officer of HS-4 above the USS Carl Vinson. He's also had a storied career during Desert Storm, and was also later reported to the USS Kearsarge as the executive officer and subsequently as the commanding officer. His flag assignments included service as Commander U.S. Naval Forces Korea, as well as Naval Component Commander United Nations Command in Seoul. And he was also Commander Navy Region Mid-Atlantic and Director of the Ashore Readiness and Staff of the Chief of Naval Operations. So following retirement, he was retired from the Navy in 2004, and he's worked in several private and nonprofit sectors, and before joining AUSN and the Navy Safe Harbor. So we're really, again, excited to have you with us. Look forward to hearing your sea stories, but also learning a bit more about Navy Wounded Warrior Program. For those of you that may not know, the Navy Wounded Warrior Program is actually underneath of the Commander of Navy Installations Command, and it has a mandate to really take care of Navy Wounded Warriors, as I mentioned. Some people may not know that they provided assistance to over 4,300 seriously wounded, ill, and injured service members throughout the country. So it's a great program, and we're happy to hear more about it. So, Admiral, welcome. Look forward to having you with us and having a good conversation.
Well, thanks very much, Aaron. I appreciate it. I'll start off with a sea story that ties in the Navy Wounded Warrior program. When I was back in the late 80s, when I was the commanding officer of HS-4, getting ready to deploy to Westpac. I had one of my senior enlisted maintainers asked me for a moment, and we chatted, and he said, "Skipper, I just had my physical to retire from the Navy, as you know, and they told me I have cancer. And Skipper, I don't know what to do. Am I supposed to retire? Is it better to retire? They're telling me no, stay on active duty. The benefits are better if you die on active duty." And I went, wow, I am not equipped to answer his questions. And we were like going on deployment the next day or something. So, but we did get his questions answered. But that really stuck in my mind that most of the command, the fleet commands they deploy, they're out at sea, they don't have the capability to take care of their sailors that get sick, and certainly if they get wounded, they're at medevac and that sort of thing, and who watches out for them, especially during their recovery process, and if they're headed out of the Navy for medical reasons, who does that? How does that all happen? And so that was the first time. That was in 1988 or 89, and really didn't encounter it again. Probably didn't think about it very often again. But I always thought, boy, we should do something about that. And it happened. What happened is, post 9/11, all that activity and the combat in Iraq, brought that to the forefront with the high casualty rate, or certainly unprecedented for the Navy in recent history. And that's when the services all said, hey, we got to do something to take care of these people, to get them to transition them back into the service, or to transition them out of the service. And that's where all the services came up with wounded warrior programs. The Navy was kind of slow. We weren't involved in the ground combat with this, some notable exceptions. For the special forces, the CDs, and a lot of folks that were sent over there to work with the Army and Air Force, etc. But in 2005, the Navy was asked by the support services for the wounded for a liaison officer. So that's when the Navy first got involved in an organizational approach to how you take care of the wounded, ill, and injured. The next year, the National Defense Authorization Act required all the services to stand it up, and that's when Navy Safe Harbor, 3 words, was stood up by the Navy as part of the CNO's organization. They called it Navy Safe Harbor because the Navy did not want to call it the Wounded Warrior Group, because not all of them were, quote, wounded. They wanted to be able to take care of those with terminal injuries and ill, and maybe non-combat, and that sort of stuff. So the Navy chose to call the program the Navy Safe Harbor Program. Navy Safe Harbor Program then recognized that they needed help from NGOs, from non-governmental organizations, from charities, to do some of the things that the Navy, the government, is not allowed to do in providing support. Great medical support and that sort of thing, but oftentimes the things that come up when those sort of traumatic things happen to a Navy family, the Navy wasn't fully equipped, nor were any of the services. So they're all standing up programs, and the Navy stood up one that they chose to call Navy Safe Harbor. Navy Safe Harbor turned to some retirees, some friends of mine, and said, hey, can you stand up an organization that helps Navy Safe Harbor? We'd like somebody of our own to ask for help in some of these charitable things. So we got involved. So that stood up in 2009, and moved through it. It was that a couple of years later, the Coast Guard also saw a need and signed a letter of agreement with the Navy, between the Commandant and the CNO, to take care of Coast Guard people as well. And so we got involved with the Coast Guard things. And then in 2012, the Navy saw that perhaps a better home for Navy Safe Harbor would be with Commander Navy Installations Command, because a lot of the things that a family in that kind of situation needs is at our family service centers, it's at the naval hospitals, it's at the PSDs, and that sort of thing, which are all come under the umbrella in some way, shape, or form of Commander Navy Installations Command. So they moved the Navy Safe Harbor to Commander Navy Installations Command, and they also changed it to Navy Safe Harbor Wounded Warrior, so that people got a little better understanding of what it was, because a lot of people were asking, well, what is Navy Safe Harbor? Is that a operational unit? What is that anyway? That helped clear it up, and so they aligned them with the Navy installation, the regions, and that sort of thing. At the naval hospitals is where they were located, although they didn't work for the hospital, and started to do and have been doing great work all along. So that's kind of where. And oh, by the way, the latest is now it's called the Navy Wounded Warrior Program. So we've sort of come full circle, and now we know it's called the Navy Wounded Warrior Program. Still resident in Commander Navy Installations Command, and still doing great stuff. What Navy Safe Harbor Foundation does, and we never changed that. There's some discussion about that. Perhaps we should have changed it, but we're still Navy Safe Harbor Foundation. We provide support to the Navy Wounded Warrior Program. And that brings us up to my next sheet of information, actually. But that's kind of the history. The mission, you probably picked up on it, but basically is to coordinate the non-medical care of the seriously injured, ill, and wounded sailors and Coast Guardsmen, including their families, and that extends out to especially families that are caregivers or providing care to the service member, be they Navy or Coast Guard. Who is eligible? It is a post 9/11 program. The Navy program is a post 9/11 program, unfortunately, because I think there's a lot of good things we could do outside of that one limitation. But it's the OEF, OIF casualties, shipboard accidents, liberty accidents, automobile accidents, motorcycle accidents, and of course the big one. More than half of our current cases involve illnesses, principally cancer, heart disease, and terrible things. Lately, we've had some cases helping folks who have been financially affected by the virus. That also extends to our program. It's about for you numbers folks. It's about 61% illness was why they're in the program. They have a qualifying malady, and about 39% injuries, I would say, and that has been coming down, obviously with the winding down of the war, but we still have some, and we'll always, I think we're always going to have unfortunate accidents and certainly illnesses where people need the kind of help that my senior chief needed 30 years ago. And what do you do now, and how do I take care of my family? We talked about the Navy Safe Harbor name and that sort of thing, but looking at my notes, as I said, what the foundation does, and in a nutshell, we write checks. We're a small organization, mostly volunteer. We work with the Navy staff. The Navy staff says, "Hey, can you help this sailor?" And that enables us to quickly help. We don't have to go through any kind of process to make sure that these are valid claims or any of that stuff. The Navy says, "Hey, can you help this?" And we do. We normally write a check, pay a bill, and it's also in the form of a grant. We don't make loans, and that can speed the process up quite a bit. Having the Navy staff the thing, let us know. They also make sure that we don't get involved in any of the health information protection. We don't want to get involved in that, and so the Navy's the one that takes care of that for us. So it works terrifically well. I think, let me see, I'll move on to, I talked about the staff size and checks and grants and things like that. As I said, the cases are staffed by the Navy. These are Navy folks, Navy civilians. There's also active duty reservists that are back in that work various aspects of it, and they do a wonderful job and allow us to. When we raise money, the money is going to go to a sailor or the family in some way. We don't have anything else to spend it on, frankly, and we have a very small staff at that. So there are other organizations that do the same thing. I'm sure you've heard of Semper Fi Fund, Yellow Ribbon Fund, Fisher House, Air Warrior Courage, a Military Bowl. Excuse me. This is just a seltzer. And they do a great job. And just to kind of wrap up my prepared remarks, such as they were, we've given away in grants in excess of $1 million since we stood up in 2013, and we also have rarely said no to the Navy. If the Navy makes a request and we have the money, we're going to do what we can to provide help. Sometimes it's in partnership with Semper Fi Fund or Yellow Ribbon or one of those, but we always try and help, and that makes for a great relationship. Oh, see, I'm not used to talking anymore.
No problem.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell. If you have any other questions, but we do ask for your help. If I know there's a lot of things to give to, but this is a great cause. It's recognized by the Navy. We have a great relationship with the Navy. I think it's unique what Navy Safe Harbor does to many Navy organizations, and we do get great support from AUSN. We get from Surface Navy Association and that sort of thing. So we're very happy to work with them and do what we can. So, are there any questions or any other sea stories I can make up?
No, definitely. I guess just for a little bit of more clarity, so when someone is looking for the assistant, is it usually a certain financial threshold or something that would cause somebody, I mean, is there a certain, I guess, criteria that are usually the vetting that takes place, or does somebody, have an issue, they don't know where to go, they call the number, and then it, what would the normal process be for someone in need?
For someone in need, well, if how they're referred, they have to get in the program first before we can help anyone. They have to be enrolled in the Navy Wounded Warrior Program. Again, you don't have to be wounded, ill or injured, and the criteria is it has a potential to change the career of the individual, either through be medically retired, go through or go back into the Navy completely fully ready. I mean, there are many that go back to the Navy. They recover. I'm sure you've read stories about losing legs and coming back on active duty. So all those things that take them through the transition, and those transitions, have to be something that's of such a level that it could end their career. Does that help?
No, absolutely. Yeah, because I'm sure there's people, as you say, that they might have heard the name or there are the Wounded Warrior Project, for instance. People probably heard about that as well. So it's really, I guess, understanding the service association. What would happen if you were on active duty or recalled reservist, or or someone that would need to have access to the program. Just understanding.
You can, in order to get into the program, you can self-refer. You can go to Wounded Warrior, maybe woundedwarrior.com, I think it is, and call the number. It's been rolling down at the bottom. But you can self-refer and talk to them on an 800 number. Normally, it comes to the Navy's attention when the individual is enrolled at a hospital, in a military hospital. There's a report that goes out, and that's usually how most are found, and most begin the process of enrolling in the program. But there are some that don't. There's some that are somewhere else, and they're hospitalized nowhere near a military facility, and we kind of depend on them, or when they get to a place where they're not treated by the military healthcare system, or their command says, "Hey, this sailor needs to get into the program so he can get help with some of these other things that are needed besides healthcare." The military healthcare is terrific, world class, but it's not BUMED's job to do what the Navy Wounded Warrior program is doing, and that's helping those people whose lives are going to change if they haven't already.
Okay, so
that got you?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that makes it much more clear. So some of the things that you mentioned with the grants that are available, it might be helping with plane tickets to get to a treatment facility, or it might be associated with the costs of hotels or other types of costs that might be above and beyond what.
All of those things. As you can imagine, the Navy does all the services, pay for a lot of travel, even travel for parents, dependents, but there's a limit on it. We pay, for example, if parents want to get to bedside while they're hospitalized for whatever reason, sometimes there's step parents involved. I think the Navy will pay for 2 people, and should that happen, that's one of the things that Navy Safe Harbor and other organizations do, is pay for that extra person. Or there's lots of dependent children, and we want to get them all together and help the recovery process. We do that, but we bought. A lot of it is when they're on the road to recovery, but they're not yet back. They're still in rehab, and would like a bicycle or a new kind of therapeutic bed in their home that the TRICARE won't pay for. Well, that's kind of the stuff that we do. I can't think of anything we haven't gotten involved in. The only thing off the top of my head is that we never paid for a service animal, and that's only because the service animal programs generally are self-funded, and everybody likes puppies, so they seem to do quite well. So if someone has a certified, verified need for a service animal, they can get it through one of the many great organizations that do that. We've had a couple of requests, and we just say, well, hey, why don't you talk to these folks, and they can help you out.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's another important aspect of this is the psychological aspect of it. I mean, a lot of times having the injury or the illness can be quite stressful, and being able to have your family there as a resource to help go through the mental aspects of it is probably one of the things that a lot of people don't always think about, as you said, going through the recovery process. So it's definitely, I'm sure, helpful and makes the recovery more go a little bit more easy, or at least.
Certainly does. It certainly does. We also want to make a plug for the Warrior Games, which are held yearly, except this year for obvious reasons. But that's been an Olympic-style Wounded Warrior competition in the fall. They've been held. All the services are hosting them. The Navy did it in Chicago a couple of years ago. This year it was supposed to be in San Antonio, hosted by the Marine Corps. But the adaptive athletics that involves is just eye-watering. when you see those sailors and airmen and Marines and soldiers get into that, even though they may be a paraplegic, they can throw the shot put, or they can, do swimming and get into the athletic competition. It's a huge part of many, many people's healthy lives, and we help with that. All the non-governmental organizations like us, particularly with the Warrior Games, because a lot of the people still enrolled in the program are retired. So even though, when you, something I didn't cover, when you are in the Navy Wounded Warrior program, or you're in the Army Wounded Warrior program, or the Marine Corps, you're in it for life. So after you're retired, you can participate in some of these other activities as part of your recovery process. So we pay for that. The government is not allowed to fund non-DoD personnel to the Warrior Games. All the active duty, which is about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the participants are active duty, but a goodly portion are medically retired, and we help them get to the games, get to the training venues, bring their family in, and all those sorts of things that we can do to help our veterans.
Yeah, incredible stories. Did you, I guess, without going into like a detail of the personal cases and things like that, but do you have an example of one incident or one opportunity that you've had where you really made an impact in someone's life, like an illustration of the kinds of things that have really, touched you or helped, reinforce how important the program is?
Well, there's, as you can imagine, there's lots and lots of programs, lots and lots of examples of that. You see them at the Warrior Games, and you talk to somebody who with crushing injuries, wounds, and I hate to, and I'm not going to use any names because then I get into trouble. And we actually don't meet many of the warriors at all because we work with the Navy. We send them a check and hope they remember our name. But during the Warrior Games, you do get to meet some of them individually. And I guess the one I can think of right now is our Wounded Warrior of the Year last year. He was a corpsman stationed in Italy. He became a rock climber and had a fall, and it was just horrendous injuries. But he had a tough time just in the initial recovery and response. But he decided once he was out, he got convinced that he needed to get back into it. When you look at what happened to him and what that involves, wow, okay. So we funded him to go to some training classes, we being Navy Safe Harbor Foundation. And this was in the United States, and he qualified for the World Games, which were over in Europe. This is last year, and he won. So we've had him. We've talked to him a couple times about that, what that did for him, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think the program did an awful lot to put him back on the road and maybe save his life. So
that's incredible.
There's a lot of those programs, of those examples, as you can imagine.
So where does the majority of the funding come from for the foundation? Is it how would you normally fund a grant, or how does that process work?
We have mostly it's the board does fundraising. We have fundraising activities and events. We have a couple golf tournaments. We have a Veterans Day luncheon. We get generous contributions from some of our industry partners. They're not. It's a charitable kind of thing that we get from a lot of corporations, from the foundations that the charities have that find out about us, and that sort of thing. So, but most of our, as you would imagine, most of the gifts are from individuals that find out about us. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. We know the Navy and I know that we're not as well known as we should be, because to begin with, the Navy does an awful lot of this stuff. I mean, they unsung heroes over there at the Navy Yard are the recovery care coordinators and care management people, and they're the ones that go find the people that can help fund some of the things that the sailors and their families need. So we do have a problem with notoriety or lack of saying. So again, thanks for coming in. Let's see as it's scrolling down. Navy Wounded Warrior will not accept money. That's a government thing, but safeharborfoundation.org will, and any amount is truly appreciated. Hopefully we'll keep you posted. You can also, in some of the magazines, we're publishing stories. Navy magazine for AUSN, I think, came out with a story and that sort of thing. So, but we need more of it, and we know it, and the Navy needs more of it, and they know it. But anyway, this is why I'm so appreciative to you, Aaron, and Mike Little sitting back there somewhere, and all the folks at the Naval Order.
We appreciate you being here. And I guess as a follow-up question, so if people did have an interest in supporting or being involved, you mentioned that a lot of the foundation is made up of volunteers, and I know you do have there is a staff for the foundation, but how would individuals be able to be involved, or how could they make a contribution of their time?
We'll certainly help with some of our events, which are on our website. And we'd love someone to start up a golf tournament in San Diego or something like that. I know that's a big project, but we've had everything from bake sales to luncheons to I know a member of ours up in Groton, Connecticut has 50-50 raffles all the time and things like that. So money is always good. Because, as I said, the way we operate, we don't have counselors. The Navy has that, and that's a medical thing. So we don't really do that. So, but if you're living in the Northern Virginia area, drop them a line on the website there and say you'd like to help write thank you cards and things like that.
No, that's great. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure you can get as many people involved and connected as possible. I guess thinking back at the history and the legacy, again, talking about naval history and the history of the sea services, how would you see the legacy of the Wounded Warrior program, or what your foundation is doing? How would you, I guess, put that into the bigger context of what we do as a sea service, or what kind of a legacy we really want to be known for, in the end of the day?
All right. Well, I really think it's tied in with the Navy Installation Command structure that was set up 20 years ago, well, 16 years ago, or whenever it was, because I see the Navy Wounded Warrior program becoming permanent, just like everyone knows that the Family Service Center is there to help families with other types of problems. I mean, it's part of the MWR program and that sort of thing. So I think it's part of that change, because when we consolidated installation management, we really took advantage of specialization and allowed the fleet to work on fleet things, because it used to be the fleet ran Navy bases, and what we really needed fleets to do was to operate ships and submarines and aircraft and things like that. So I think this is another arrow in the quiver of the Navy Installations Command going forward. I remember when, back at the turn of the century, before 9/11, one of the things we used to talk about was transformation and how that was going to impact the Navy. And of course, that sort of got upset by what happened in 9/11. So I think that when I look back and I think, well, what's really been transformed of all the things that I saw in the Navy in 1971 when I was an ensign, what has really changed is how we run Navy bases. We support the families and the fleet and the fighters, as they say, from ashore, and let the fleet do the fleet thing, and let Navy Installations Command and UMED do their things. I hope that comes close to answering your question.
No, I think it's important too, because to highlight this, and I know with your past, flag assignments, but also when you were with the Readiness Command, I mean, obviously dealing with the backbone and the infrastructure, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people take for granted, and they don't always, okay, you drive by, you see the barbed wire, you see the security guards on the gates, but don't always understand the complexity of what's behind it. Right. So I think in a lot of ways, it's important that we do highlight that as an essential part of what we do for the nation, and how the sea services are supported, whether from a Navy side or a Coast Guard side, or
right.
etc. So I would say, I guess just looking at your history and the different types of things that you've done, how would you say that your past sort of prepared you for what you do today, or what the impact that you've been able to make for sailors and wounded warriors?
Wow. Well, let's see. Well, I think I had a lot of fleet experience and a lot of sea tours, and got to see a lot. In many cases, I say Gomer Pyle, but I always seemed to be around when something was happening. So I think that's given me perspective. The senior chief coming to me as he got really bad news was something that gave me a great deal of empathy for that kind of thing, both to the service member and his or her family, and that impact. So I'd like to think that Safe Harbor, my contributions at Safe Harbor, were part of that. And also, I'm real proud of Navy Installations Command for stepping up to the plate, and I think doing a great job in just because this is a new mission for them, and I'm really proud that they stand behind it and keep doing it, and keep working hard.
And you mentioned earlier some cases of COVID, and I guess this whole new normal that we're going into. How do you see the Navy having to adapt? I guess maybe not to go too much on a tangent, but as you mentioned, you're able to support people that are also affected by the COVID cases, or illnesses generally. So how do you see, I guess, as you mentioned before, the transformation, or what do we have to do differently, or how do we protect ourselves differently? I guess I know it's a bit of a broad question, but
just a bit, yeah.
Yes. So
yeah, I mean, who would have thought? I mean, even a year ago, 6 months ago, who would have thought that this was we were facing with, there may be things that we'll never do again, and things that were really part of our DNA, and we have to figure out some way to do them, because we can't do it the old-fashioned way. That's a constant problem. Military, when national defense. I like to think that the DoD is good at it, but this is hard. Now, Safe Harbor has not been involved in the medical parts of it, but the impact of those sorts of things, of the medical impact to families that aren't sick, or to even the people when they're recovered, I think is going to be significant, and sadly so. I'll have to give some thought about how I would approach it, but I think we have to understand that. Let's come up with a checklist of how we're going to transition out of this. how are we going to go back to the way it was? When I think what we really need to focus on is how are we going to handle the new normal, and because I think sometimes you just have to make the assumption that we can't go back. It's just not gonna. It can't be that way for whatever. Goodness knows, I hope so. I hope we figure a solution that allows us to think of this as only a bad dream. But the chances are there will be things that are gone, and we need to figure out the best ways to transition to that new normal, not thinking about how we're going to transition back to what we used to do, because frankly, we know how to do that. We've done it, so that's pretty easy transition. But transitioning to something completely new, that's a challenge in every aspect, from national defense to education to farming.
Right. And I guess the other big thing too is just the fact that, when you look at the types of cases that they've had, and, at least they've been saying that the younger, the people below 30 or something like that are less, impacted. But as you get to the older age groups, then, obviously underlying conditions having a big effect. But just seeing what happened, obviously you were commanding officer on some large deck vessels, and having to deal with an outbreak of COVID on an aircraft carrier, I'm sure is something that most people don't
Right.
train for on a daily basis. But
right, this is a watershed event. I mean, it was and continues to be. It's going to be a tough leadership problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And then extended deployments or having to quarantine on the bases, and just having to deal with all of those types of nightmare scenarios.
Right.
Definitely, it's hard. It's going to be hard on our leadership, I'm sure. But as you said, hopefully we'll adapt and transform appropriately.
Well, I'm sure we will. The sooner is better than later.
Absolutely. So, but I definitely appreciate the dialogue and discussions that we've had so far. I know you've covered a lot of background on the program. You've talked a lot about the impact that you're making to individuals. I think the important thing here is it really is about individuals. It's about that individual sailor, reaching out at a personal level. And a lot of times our programs, we talk about thousands of people or millions of, people in the military, but it really comes down to those individual stories, and it's about how we can make an impact, day by day in those individuals' lives. So we definitely appreciate, what you've been able to do and what the Navy Wounded Warrior Program has been able to do. I guess, would there be any other message or any kind of summary that you'd like to share with the audience of just things to think about, and especially as they think into the future of ways that they can help out?
Well, I think my last message was be thankful to the Navy for the work that they do in these really difficult times. I mean, that's a message I wish I had said earlier this evening, is that, first of all, I'd like to point out what a great job the Navy is doing in taking care of their wounded warriors and their families. And when, talk about lives changing, I think I'm real proud of what the Navy has been doing, and I've been able to see it up close and personal. The other services are the same way, by the way. I really think we should be proud of how we're handling the impact of the last 20 years.
No, I definitely appreciate that. And so hopefully people will take this opportunity to learn more about what's happening sort of behind the curtain, and understand the great things that are happening within our facilities and in the lives of sailors. Hopefully people will also reach out and look at some of the websites and get more information. As you said before, maybe if they can even have bake sales or be able to be part of a golf tournament, do what they can. Sure. Every little bit helps, as always. Sure. But yeah, we're all in this together.
And study your naval history. I'm a big buff, and I think we can learn a lot.
No, absolutely. I know when we were talking earlier a little bit about the I guess Horatio Hornblower and being
Right,
able to celebrate. Yeah. So it's good when we can have these kind of common themes where people come together
sure.
and be able to talk about the great things that the sea services are doing. So we definitely appreciate your love of history as well.
Well, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody. SafeHarborFoundation.org.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our members, the companions within the Continental Commandery. Thank you for participating in this webinar again. We definitely enjoy looking more deeply into different subjects and learn more about our sea services. I think it's important when we can, not just talk about ships and not just talk about aircraft, but we can also talk about making impacts in the lives of sailors, and then the legacy of, what we take away from that as a nation, and the great things that people are doing every day to take care of sailors. We really appreciate, your commitment towards promoting the sea services, and we definitely encourage you to continue to get involved, to continue to share your stories, and to continue to help us make a difference in the lives of the sailors in this nation. So thank you so much for joining. Hope you join us for future webinars, and we look forward to being with you again. So thank you. Good night.